Welcome to another week in the garden as I appear from beneath the wisteria. It's been lovely out here. You can smell the beautiful scent of nature. And today we're going to think about the things that can affect how successfully organisms survive and breed. And one of the big problems that we as a race, the human race that is, are putting on our planet is the fact that we put a lot of pollutants and toxins into the environment. And today we're going to learn about the idea of biomagnification and how that causes issues for organisms in food chains. So it's a very long word, bioaccumulation, more syllables than is good for anyone. But what does it actually mean? I've got a bowl of water here. So this represents the environment into which chemicals leak and can be put into. And I've got two different chemicals. I've got on one side this chemical. It's actually brown sugar, but this chemical represents a chemical that the environment can deal with. So if I put this chemical into the environment, initially it might be there at high concentrations, but as time goes by, the chemical gets broken down and used in the environment. So actually, if I did spill a whole load of sugar in the environment, it might make a sticky mess for a little while, but the organisms in the environment can break it down. They use the sugar in their metabolism to respire and release energy, and so sugar wouldn't be viewed as a very dangerous thing to spill into the environment, and is not something that would bioaccumulate because it will break down quite easily, and the cells of organisms that it gets into will be able to break it down harmlessly and it won't cause a problem. However, on the other hand, we have chemicals which we call persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals, or PBTs for short. Now, you don't need to learn that term for exams and things, but the general word for things that do not break down in the environment easily, that's why we call them persistent, and therefore build up in the environment, that's why we call them bioaccumulative, become poisons, toxic chemicals. A good example of one of those is a pesticide called DDT, and it was used a lot in the 1940s to kill insect pests in the environment before they realised the damage it could do. This is its full name, another one with many syllables: dichloro, diphenyl, trichloroethane. Again, you don't need to know that, but if you use that word, anyone who knows anything about harmful chemicals will have heard of it, DDT. And in my little model here, we've got DDT represented by Lego blocks. Now, if I put the Lego blocks into my environment, you can see that no matter how much I mix it around, even though they might be present at relatively low concentrations here, the environment just can't get rid of them. It can't deal with them, and it can get into the tissues of organisms in the environment, and they don't know how to break it down either. And so this can, in time, become a real problem. Let's see how. At the cellular level, here's a cell with its nucleus. At the cellular level, what a bioaccumulating substance does, thing like DDT, is it will be absorbed by the cell from the environment that the cell's in. Now, if it's present at very low concentrations in the environment, it might then get into the cell at reasonably low concentrations. But because it's a persistent, non-biodegradable chemical, the cell cannot break this down, and it stays within the cell until that cell dies or is eaten by another organism. And when it dies, it still stays in the tissue that that cell was part of. So when this cell containing these toxic chemical molecules gets absorbed into another organism in the next level of the food chain, that organism is getting these toxic chemicals along as part of the deal.
Some toxic chemicals stay in an organism's system. This happens when an organism cannot get rid of the chemicals in its body as fast as the chemicals are built up in its body tissue. Some chemicals have toxic properties that can cause an array of adverse health effects, including cancer, immune system damage, and many other diseases.
Now let's see what happens in food chains. So how did bioaccumulation work in the natural environment? Well, here we've got a bit of natural environment, this background here, looking very planty. And then moving across here, the characters in my little video are persistent bioaccumulative and toxic chemical, PBT, called DDT, who I've introduced you to earlier, represented by the Lego blocks. The primary producers in our environment are the algae and the green stuff growing in the lake that we are based in here. In addition to that, we've got a couple of characters here. Who is one of our primary consumers? Hello, I'm a primary consumer. And we've got another one who can come along here. Come along. He's a bit shy though. Hello, I'm also a primary consumer. And the big bad top predator. I'm the top predator. Perfectly camouflaged to sneak up on hapless and unwary primary consumers. Unfortunately, some of the pesticides, the DDT that was being illegally applied in the fields nearby the lake, have been washed into the lake by some heavy rainfall, and you can see that there's some DDT molecules present in the lake at very low concentrations. Now, our primary consumer, who he is, will graze on the algae and will consume algae which has got some of these toxic chemicals in it now, which it will have absorbed from the lake. And although it's eaten some of the chemical, it's currently only present at very low concentrations. So if we look under a little consumer, oh, he's got some DDT in there, and we'll just interview him. Hello, primary consumer. Can you tell me how you're feeling at the moment?
Well, food tastes a little bit funny, but I'm not really feeling any problem at all. So I'm just going to carry on quite happily.
And so our primary consumers are largely unaffected by the low concentrations of DDT in their environment, and they will happily graze on the algae, unwittingly absorbing a couple of, whoops, he's feeling a little bit woozy, couple of bits of the toxic persistent chemical as they go. And it won't cause them any ill effects at all. However, the top predator is lying in wait, and he will eat any of the primary consumers that he can. The top predator is sneaking around, and he has to eat a lot of primary consumers in order to meet his requirements for survival, because he's running around and moving a lot and using lots of energy. And yeah, that one. Oh, I think we need to interview him and see how he feels. He's had a pretty good feast by now. He's eaten lots and lots and lots of primary consumers. Hello, top predator. He's not in a very good mood, is he? How do you feel? How are you feeling at the moment? Oh, I'm feeling a bit. Oh dear. It's not looking too good for top predator. I think he might be dead. But I think we better have a look and see if we can do a post-mortem on him and see what the problem is. So we take him back to the lab and we find out what's in his tissues. And if we do... Oh, that's the problem. He's got loads and loads and loads of this toxic chemical accumulated inside his tissues. He was unable to break them down. And because he ate so many consumers, each of which only had a little bit of this toxic chemical in them, because the chemical couldn't be broken down, it built up in his tissues to such a level that our poor predator passed away. And that's what happens in nature when toxic chemicals bioaccumulate through the food chain. And that whole process of bioaccumulation and biomagnification is what we need to avoid by designing pesticides and chemicals that break down naturally in the environment very quickly as soon as they've done their job.
Biomagnification is the increase in concentrations of harmful substances in the environment as they pass through successive trophic levels of food chains and food webs.
Certain toxic substances, like the pesticide DDT, accumulate in the tissues of animals. This is called bioaccumulation. When DDT is sprayed on a marsh, its concentration in the water is very low. DDT is picked up by the plankton living in the marsh, and it accumulates in their tissues. Small fish that eat the plankton get a higher dose of DDT because of the accumulation resulting from eating many plankton during their lifespan. Larger fish that eat many smaller fish receive an even higher dose of DDT. Birds that eat fish, such as this heron, will receive a still higher dose because they eat many fish throughout their lives. This increased concentration of toxic substances in the bodies of animals higher on the food chain is called biological magnification or amplification. From the lowest trophic level, the plankton, to the highest trophic level, the birds, the concentration of DDT in body tissues may increase by a factor of over 100,000. As a result, the populations of several predatory bird species have drastically declined.
The impact of most man-made chemicals are still unknown, particularly the long-term impacts of these chemicals. If we continue putting chemicals into the environment and allow those chemicals to biomagnify, the impact may have extreme effects on humans as well.